Sar Ahmadiel. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great, Brother Palal. Hallelujah.
Oh,
All
man.
praises to the Most High.
All praises to the Most High. It's back again. So we get straight into it, but I want to let the people know I'm talking to an author. I'm talking to the minister of information. I'm talking to a wise brother. I don't want to say elder because we don't get old, you know.
We get older, but we don't get old.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. So let me start it off with this. Judaism. Now, how do you feel if brothers convert into Judaism, and would you ever convert into Judaism?
First, Kol Kavod Yah Yahweh, first giving all praises to Yah Yahweh, his anointed son and servant Ben-Ami in this dispensation, who had the vision to bring us back into this holy land of ours. I greet you, Shalom. You and your audience here. That's an excellent question because it is officially the only way, the only avenue into full acceptance by the gatekeepers of Israel at this particular point in dispensation of time. From the very beginning of our arrival here, because in 1969, when the brothers and sisters came from Liberia directly here, from Liberia, we were offered conversion. After the change in the law of return, the offer was put out for us to convert. And on principle, we would not convert, and that remains our official policy. That for us to convert would basically be a tacit acknowledgement that we are not who we said we were in the beginning. And for us, that would be an affront to ourselves personally. It would be an affront to our posterior. It would be an affront unto the Holy One Himself. And so conversion is not an option.
Not an option.
For me personally or for us communally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you. How do you feel if other brothers, that's not within the community, convert to Judaism to get citizenship?
The question is convert from what to what? And ultimately you'd be talking about you converting to a religious belief system.
Yeah.
And we're not religious, and we openly will say that our identification with Judah or Yehuda is our tribal ancestry.
Okay.
And you don't convert that.
Yeah.
You don't convert from that. You are that. And so that's non-negotiable for us.
Okay.
And we would not frown on those. I mean, we know quite a few brethren and families who've African American family members who've gone that route. But I think even they themselves would concede that it was a tactical move, a strategic move to allow them to get a foothold here. But for us collectively, it's just not an option. It's not something we would embark on.
I'm with you on that. Alright, so now when I was in the museum the other day, something really, exciting, and I like to learn the information, and I'd be like, my mind like, okay.
Yeah.
One of the things was interesting to me, because I've been to the blue now, and I've been to the white now before. One thing, Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 to 13, dealing with the first two rivers. Can you explain to the people how you feel that those is synonymous with the white Nile and the blue Nile?
Well, both of the first two rivers, when they're mentioned, the Gihon and the Pishon, they are mentioned in conjunction with Ethiopia, and the reference is that these rivers encompasseth And to encompasseth or compasseth is basically to wander through, you know. And what two rivers wander through what in antiquity was a much larger landmass than the modern nation state of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was much larger than what it is today. But we know that one of the places mentioned in conjunction with that river is it says it meanders through the land of Havilah, where there's gold.
Yeah.
And Havilah was a son of Cush. Havilah was a son of ancient Ethiopia. And so when you talk about those four sons of Ham, Libya, Put, Mitzrayim, Egypt, Canaan, which is where we are, and Cush, those four peoples, then obviously they're in that vicinity together. So we know that Ethiopia, Cush, did not extend all the way up to where Libya is, where Put is, and didn't extend all the way up into where Mitzrayim was, and it didn't extend all the way up here. But still, it points us in that northeast African direction. And the two major rivers there are indeed the Nile and the Blue and the White Niles. So both of those references. And now one of our brothers, Sar Ahmadiel, he went down into Tanzania to visit one of the brothers from back in the struggle days, the revolutionary days, who had left America and was living in Tanzania. And while he's there visiting, he stays in the Hotel Gihon, So this is part of, these little pieces and remnants of these ideas. The people there will say, there's a lot of culture that ties them and links them to these areas. So we're pretty confident. Now, I would point your listeners and viewers to and I would send it to you. I'll send you the link to it.
Okay.
If indeed it's a link. I think we had to actually record it.
Okay.
Because it's not available. National Geographic did a movie, a documentary on what the subject was Cain and Abel. And about halfway to 2/3 in, they focus on the Garden of Eden. And they all the way through now, National Geographic, they're known for their graphics and they're experts in the maps and what have you. So they did a job, and they're using the scriptures. And then they go into talking about the garden, and they talk about the rivers. Well, all of a sudden, they deal with those last two, and then when they turn and start dealing with the first two, because the last two, Euphrates and the Tigris, they got that right. And then they start dealing with the first two, and then all of a sudden, no more scriptures, because the scriptures pointed you to Ethiopia very clearly. And so they then, next thing you know, they're not taking you from the Euphrates coming to the west. They're taking you from the Euphrates going to the east, into the Persian Gulf, and claiming that is where, these rivers are. That is where the first two rivers, the Pishon and the Gihon, were. And so in the end, they actually are concluding that the garden, and then the way that they twist it, and you know how it is when you tell a lie, you mess it up. You're gonna mess it up.
Yeah.
And so they end up basically saying that the garden was in the center of Eden. Well, that wasn't where the garden was. The garden was eastward in Eden.
Yeah.
And so, but you can see it just so very clearly, and you can see these bandits lying through their teeth. Anything but to point any truth seeker in the direction of Africa being where that garden was, and Africa being the biblical Eden. The garden was eastward in Eden.
Yeah.
And so National Geographic, they're part and parcel of these institutions that are out to wage this war of deception and lies.
Yeah.
So it's very, very plain and clear to us. But any open-minded individual can look at this and say, that's a reference to the Blue and the White Nile, and all the way to the Euphrates, and the Nile to the Euphrates being the boundaries of the biblical promised land. We feel that any open-minded scholarly person would come to the same conclusion.
So is it safe to say that the Garden of Eden could have been located, parts of what they're called the Middle East and East Africa?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was going to say, because even, I've been down to what's called Sterkfontein in South Africa.
Yeah.
And it is where they supposedly have found some remnant of humanoid skulls that date back X millions of years ago, even supposedly older than Lucy, which was, we're talking about a skeleton that they found, that they only found 3% of. 3% of a skeleton, and that they reconstruct this skeleton based on 3% of the skeleton that they found.
Yeah.
And conclude that this is the earliest form of humanity.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen those relics, those skeletons down in Sterkfontein in South Africa, and those are not my ancestors.
They short, ain't it?
Hey, that's another kind of creature.
Yeah.
Now, being real, if those are indeed authentic skulls and skeletal structures, fine, but that's another species, and so, the biggest embarrassment to modern professional paleoanthropologists, those who study ancient peoples and ancient cultures, the biggest embarrassment to that profession is what they call the missing links. That there's no progression of evolutionary growth on the part of these lower mammals, these lower humanoid forms, to where they came up from all fours and began to walk upright. They find something here, they find something here, and you find people who, in all honesty, in this city, back in the 70s when I first moved here, I saw people walking around who were like this.
Yeah.
And if you live in a cold environment like Siberia, like Russia, in the northern Icelandic areas, if you are not getting the minerals that you need from the calcium and what have you from the plant life, you can't grow spinach and other things that would strengthen your skeletal system, then you would have later in life, you would have what's called osteoporosis. You would not be able to hold yourself up straight. So I've seen evidence of a type of human form that walked over, humpback like that. But that's the best approximation I can give you for the existence of those types of forms.
Yeah.
But we don't believe that human, the Sterkfontein and Lucy were our ancestors.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Informative. So how long has this community been established? How many years exactly?
The community in terms of our presence
Dimona.
in Israel,
the presence in Dimona.
Our arrival in 1969 between Dimona and Arad, the two cities in this particular area, part of the Negev. The Negev was and is a home to several development towns, towns that were established to provide housing for those who might work in this particular region of the country. This is a pretty inhospitable region, at least for certain types of people who like to, they don't like the sun. It's dry and hot. We live in what is called the Negev Desert, but it's not a desert like the Sahara Desert. It's not. This is not sand. This is soil, and as you bear witness, I'm growing okra and tomatoes and corn and peppers, this summer, and come another couple months from now, we'll be growing broccoli and collard greens and callaloo and other produce from the soil here that we have ourselves tilled. So this is this southern Judea area, southern Judean mountains. This is part of what's called the Negev region, and it simply meant barren land. It was dry, but it's up under a prophetic curse. We'll talk about this in the morning when you and I travel to Jerusalem, but in Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, I think around the 45th verse, Ezekiel pronounces that there would be a curse upon the land, and the land would be burnt. Well, that was part and parcel of the plan of Yah to make the land barren It actually says prophesy against the forest of the Negev. And so we realize that this land here, this area here, used to actually be forested. But who knows that the Sahara Desert used to be a forest? And it was centuries and centuries of deforestation, of raking the land of the vegetation by the Greeks coming across the Mediterranean, hundreds of years. The Romans continuing that process. It turned the process of deforestation. It turned the Sahara into what it is today.
Wow.
But Muammar Gaddafi was clear that up under the Sahara lie aquifers, huge aquifers with trillions of gallons of fresh water locked into the bowels of the earth. He tapped into that and began to make Libya bloom and blossom. Well, we know that in its natural state, the planet will renew itself. We don't need to go digging down for that. At some point, those aquifers will be released and will allow those waters to flow and allow the replenishment of the Earth's surface. So everything's in perfect order. Like I was saying last night to you, we're not worried about the planet.
Yeah.
We're worried about the people on the planet.
Right on. Right on. So now you mentioned in the community that you planning things. I seen some collard greens over there, you know.
Right.
So can you tell me about the economical structure that the community has set up? You know, dealing with farming. You know, just the economical structure that's set up, that's maintaining the community.
We set up a system called All Things Common. It's taken from the book of Acts, the 5th chapter, and basically in recognition that we need to learn how to share, that there are enough resources to go around if we would only share, that everyone doesn't need a private automobile. We were more or less forced into this because of those hardships of the early years when we didn't have status, didn't have work permits. Brothers might have been arrested and imprisoned and deported, families still here. We weren't going to let those families suffer. And so all the brothers that were working, sisters that they were working odd jobs, sewing or doing whatever they were doing, everybody would put into the pot, and you take out according to your need. Now, two brothers might work the same job and bring home the same salary, but it was understood as our collective commitment to this idea that, well, obviously, brother, you got a bigger family than me. I'm not bent out of shape because you take more out the pot. It's just. And so that became our economic standard, our economic system. And it worked. It worked. We, at the end of the month, because in those days you work a whole month before you got paid. Now it's every 2 weeks, you know. And people took advantage of us. You know, they knew we didn't have work permits. They knew we didn't have any legal recourse. So sometimes a contractor, after we worked a month, he'd run off with our monies. You know, we couldn't do anything, but we knew that, okay, brother so-and-so, they need some money this week. And we, by the end of the month, the pot would be empty. Everybody's needs will have been fulfilled. Oh, wow. You know, and it was spiritual like that. And everything worked out perfectly.
That's interesting.
And so it became the foundation of our economic system, and we know that sharing has to be part of any structure going forward. And we can't keep buying into this myth that democracy and its sister institution of capitalism are models somehow for human development and global development. Yah forbid that everybody live according to those types of standards and allow those types of exploitative institutions continue operating on the planet just for the sake of profiteering and greed and what have you. No, there is such a thing as responsible mining and responsible agricultural practices, but you can't exploit the earth and think that you're going to have a happy social existence on the planet as people. It's not going to work like that. Understood.
So now I want to talk about some of the political struggles that the community faced, you know, being out here in Dimona. So tell me about the struggles, you know, the community faced and is facing when it comes to citizenship out here in Israel?
Well, we just simply all lump all that under status, legal status
Mm-hmm.
that allows us to be here without being hassled,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, there are some who insist that, the issue is a struggle for sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sovereignty ultimately extends from Yah himself. And we don't have a problem, in recognizing that. And we know that all of these borders that exist from all across the planet, that they were basically colonial constructs, that they were established by someone, and they had their purpose and mission. In particular, as Africa goes, the way that the boundaries are drawn, that actually separated. For example, in West Africa, you have the Ewe people, who by right would be their own nation, the Ewe's. But now the boundaries extend from the Volta region of Ghana, the most the easternmost part of Ghana, across into Togo, the country of Togo, and across into Benin, and across into the westernmost state of Nigeria. That is all Ewe land, but now you got two languages, Anglophone and Francophone, and you got 4 countries and different monetary systems. So all that is part of the confusion that has been imposed on us. And this land is no different. So we can, we know that all this will pass away as we continue to evolve into or back into our pristine relationship with the Creator and with one another. That this nationalism, these sentiments that have a lot of animosity between peoples, that will dissipate. And we won't have to, have dropping passports and where you from and trying to figure out, Google Translate to be able to, but this is far off. This is the long view. Obviously, it's going to take a while, but nevertheless, that is the ultimate trajectory that we see humanity moving in, and we see it beginning. We see the consciousness, because everything begins with a thought. So we see the consciousness of that kind of environment where people are longing for that and realizing the benefits of that. I mean, the EU practiced that, put a lot of those principles in practice. When the AU is talking about the same thing. Why can't we do that? Why can't we have a common language? Why can't we have no borders? And the next step is actually coming together to do it.
So 54 years, and still fighting, for everybody in the community to have citizenship.
And it's okay. Again, I will correct thee in measure, and you will not go altogether unpunished. And so we look at the hardships sometimes that we have to go through. Remember, we were chastised. And so I don't know about you, but my father put a tanning on my behind, and I remember vividly, sometimes being sent home to bed without your dinner or something, and you'd be up in your room sitting on the edge of the bed, and you could feel those whelps, and an hour after the whooping, you would be, and you would be reminded, about that. You would feel those the stings,
Good whooping.
It was a good whooping, And so on our way back, we attribute some of the hardships that we still have to go through to that, that idea, just to keep it fresh. Because Israel's known for forgetting, lest ye forget. So we were always told to remember, and so we forgot. Our ancestors forgot, and we are the children. In the book of Hosea, the 4th chapter, we are the children that said that you forgot the law of thy Lord, of Yah. I will forget your children. We are those children who woke up trying to figure. We woke up in South Africa. We woke up in West Africa. We woke up in America trying to figure out, why are we catching hell? And the only explanation for that is that we're the sons and daughters of that people that
we still receiving the aftermath of the what?
How is to look at this?
Yeah.
Are we naturally inferior? Are we? We're numerically superior.
Yeah.
You know, in certain lands, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Are we naturally intellectually inferior?
Mm-hmm.
It don't make sense. We know we're not. You know, but what is holding us back? But what's holding us back is Yah's holding us back. Maybe these, as it's written, the blessings have been withheld from us. Why? Going back to our parents again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they gave us whoopings and they also gave us allowances.
Mm-hmm.
They give you an allowance and they see what you're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you be a fool with it, they get ready to write off their inheritance and make sure that this inheritance goes to you. No, they're going to put that in a trust. You know, until you get your act together, until you meet certain criteria, but they're not getting ready to bestow great blessings on you until if they have discerned that you're a fool with some money or a fool with some resources. Maybe when we demonstrate that we would not allow Africa to be pillaged and raped and give all the wealth away and do things foolish with it, and everybody buy cars with it and travel around, fly around to Paris and London, you know, with our newly acquired wealth.
Yeah.
Maybe Yah's withheld that, waiting to see what you're going to do with it.
So like the maturing of a nation.
Precisely. And we're coming into that point now. We have to be responsible.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to set a new standard for the earth, because
Yeah.
right now the standard is just get whatever you can,
Yeah.
as much as you can,
Yeah.
however you can. And we know that corruption, that leads to corruption.
Yeah.
You know, and children figured that out a long time ago. Said, well, I got to, y'all suffering, going to school. Hey, when I can sell these things on the corner and get what you're talking about now. So we know there has to be a different paradigm for how we understand wealth and those kind of pursuits altogether.
Gotcha. Interesting. I'm gonna stop this and then we're gonna come back.